This is what happens when you Raptorize a Defender and then add in some Bentley and maybe a little bit of X5M for good measure. This is a beast. What you're looking at here is the new Land Rover Defender Octa. It's the new Halo version of the Defender, and in today's video we're going to take you all around this Defender, talk about the suspension, talk about that engine, the interior, and get it out on the road to find out, is this Defender Octa really worth $170,000. That's right, over $100,000 more than the base model Defender on which it's based. Pretty crazy. All right, let's talk about it. Now, the Defender Octa is a pretty subtle appearance difference from a standard Defender, and this is one area where I wish Land Rover went a little bit more crazy, because the platform, the changes underneath the skin that they made are crazy. Now, there are a couple of ways to tell the difference. Let me go ahead and start it up, and I want you to show the front end, Gavin. With the marker lights on, you're going to notice just that, the marker lights. So at the front end of the Octa, you're going to find these 3 amber marker lights built into the grille just below the carbon fiber Defender logo. Now, the reason that this Defender has marker lights is because it's a full 2.7 inches wider. This is a wide boy, and they needed that to stay legal, just like you would need it on an HD truck, just like you would need it on a Bronco Raptor or F-150 Raptor. Defender had to do the same thing in the front end, which is pretty crazy. And like I said, that 2.7 inches is all going to be seen here in the body through these flares. So the actual sheet metal is the same from a standard Defender 110 to the Octa, but you have these color coordinated flares that cover these 275/60 R20 tires. Now, very different wheel, tire, and suspension setup to a standard Defender. So let me explain how this works. It still has air suspension. It can still go up and down like a standard Defender. It's got about 1 inch of additional ground clearance. But the crazy part about this is this car has no sway bars whatsoever. It's got none, right? So what they do instead is, in the damper, it's all hydraulically controlled and interlinked throughout the vehicle, so front to rear, side to side. And what that means is they can get really precise body control movements and really precise articulation control through the use of hydraulics instead of a fixed sway bar. So they have the ability to sort of quote unquote disconnect the sway bar, or the equivalent of, right, or get a really firm quote unquote sway bar for on-road performance. It's a really interesting setup. So it's got hydraulic and air in the suspension, and then beyond that, it even has longer control arms, so you get some additional wheel travel but still maintain that roll center of the vehicle, still maintain that contact patch. So it's been very well thought out, and it's not just like we'll put on some hydraulic crud and call it a day. They've actually re-engineered the suspension, which is a pretty wild and expensive thing to do. Now, this Edition 1 Octa, you're going to notice this kind of theme of the gold against this carbon. So we see that here on this intake here, you see it up here on the hood, and then my favorite bit of gold is actually going to be down here in the front end. So on the lower front fascia here, if you want to kind of get low there, the recovery point is large and in charge. It's exposed. Oh no, it's not! It's a cap! This is terrible news! So underneath that cap's the recovery point, but it's just got a cap on it. All right, I'm gonna give that a thumbs down. I thought actually the recovery point was gonna be exposed. All right, well, it's not a perfect thing from a design standpoint. Now, along the side here, I would appreciate if Land Rover gave this thing a rock rail or a rock protection. It does have additional underbody protection, but rock rails would be a great thing to have. You're going to see this diamond throughout. Now, this is the actual Octa logo for octahedral. It's designed after a diamond, right? 8 points. And you're going to see this little guy with, granted, 4 points throughout the vehicle. So it's there on that little side panel. You're going to see it in the interior a bunch. And then out back, we see a lot of that same design trend. So the little gold recovery points, these ones are real, which I appreciate. It's very cool. We see the 20-inch wheel here and a tire. Now, speaking of these 20-inch wheels, this thing's got monster brakes. There's no downgrading wheel size. You can go up, you can get the Octa with a 22-inch wheel and a street tire, but you're not gonna go down to a wheel size, which I think for an off-road standpoint is a little bit of a bummer. But it is a good looking wheel, and I love that you can actually get a factory equipped Duratrack RT. This is a pretty beefy tire, pretty good tread block there, and pretty good sidewall as well. Popping open the trunk here, all of this is going to be very standard Land Rover. We got our cooler full of our drinks here because we're out here in Moab, Utah. And then you've got a quad exhaust setup. Gavin, if you want to kind of show that there. So they've actually changed the approach and departure angle of this vehicle. So it's up 1 degree in the departure angle, up 3 degrees in the approach, and then they fitted these quad exhausts so that they kind of hide away and aren't getting caught up off-road. And that brings us to the engine. Now, Land Rover Defender, right? In the US market, 3 primary engines. You got the basic 4-cylinder called the P300. You've got the inline 6, the 3-liter, the P400, that's a mild hybrid. And then you've got the supercharged V8. This Octa doesn't have any of those. Instead, it has a 4.4-liter twin-turbo V8 with 626 horsepower, 583 pound-feet of torque. And what's interesting about this engine is that you've probably heard 4.4 twin-turbo elsewhere. And yes, you can get this engine in the Range Rovers, but you can also get it in a BMW, actually several BMWs. And if you look just down there, kind of by the front end of the engine, you might just barely see that BMW roundel, because this is, at the end of the day, a BMW sourced engine. So we'll get it out on the road here in a sec, and I'll talk to you about what it feels like on the road. And then, if you head over to TFL Off-Road in just a couple days, we're gonna have an epic off-roading adventure in this thing out here in Utah. But Gavin, let's hop on in the inside and show what we got. So the first thing you're going to notice are these crazy seats. It's a one-piece style bucket seat with its upper portion, which is unattachable from the bottom, in this crazy kind of Kalahari green, I think is what they call it. Let me get the exact wording here. Khaki and ebony ultra fabrics, right? Exterior is pharaoh green. What's cool about this is it feels like almost like a neoprene material. It feels really durable, and it's not a typical leather, but it still feels premium, and I like this kind of woven cloth at the top side of the vehicle. And you see that green finish continue across the inside here, like the steering wheel, this cool two-tone green and black. Same thing with the dash finish. And then you notice this little button down here in the steering wheel, which is unique to the Octa. If I push it once, exhaust flaps open, puts us into the Octa mode, the dynamic mode, right? This is gonna be your street performance mode. But if I push and hold it, then it's going to turn red. And so are the tips of the paddle shifters. And now we are in Octa mode. And this is kind of a high-speed desert running setting. Pretty cool stuff, right? And it loosens up those hydraulic dampers to give you a little bit of float, right? A little bit of body roll, a little bit of compliance. This is not a track driving setting. This is a off-road driving setting. Only in high range, it keeps the vehicle at normal height, and then you can bomb down the desert. Now, if we look at the actual center of the vehicle here, we've got our 11.4-inch display with the usual tiles. We've got all of the off-road information that you'd find in any other Defender, right? Just more of it. Sensor locking diff, rear locking diff. We've got the off-road cameras. I really wish that these could become bigger. I wish this would take up the whole screen. This is kind of one complaint I have, is that it's very, very small. So that would be really cool if that took up the whole screen. And then of course you do have wireless Apple CarPlay like you'd expect. And then some physical buttons still down here for climate control, for your front and rear defrost. And then we also have our air suspension buttons here with our low range. And then I can push in on this, and then I can go through all of the different usual Land Rover settings like wade, rock crawl, sand, mud ruts, grass, gravel, snow, that kind of thing. And then of course Octa, we're gonna go back to normal. So we've seen what it's like outside. We've seen what it's like inside. We've talked about the price. Get 17 mpg because it's a twin turbo V8. Let's see what it drives like on the road in the Defender Octa. Now let's talk about this party button. If I push it once, it puts us in dynamic mode, a little bit of brake torque. Strong pull for the first few gears. And that is the speed limit. Crazy power, right? More power than you would ever need in a monster, relatively long wheelbase SUV. I mean, it's unbelievable. And the character of this engine is really interesting. So the supercharged V8 you can get in the Defender, it kind of screams and shouts and wails in the upper RPM. This engine is much more subdued in how it delivers power. So you get kind of this huge, monstrous tsunami of midline torque. So from 2,500 to like 5,000 RPM is really where this engine is happiest. And what's cool is like you're cruising around like this, you want to pass someone, you just click it down one cog on the transmission and go for it. All right, that was a couple cogs. And as long as you're like around 3,000 RPM, you can build up boost on those turbos and just rock it down the road. Now, I will say, for being the highest performance Halo SUV, it's a pretty subdued experience out of that engine. Even with the exhaust baffles open, you do get some more sound, especially when it's under load, and you do get occasional kind of pops and bangs on the runoff, but it's not quite as exciting or fizzy as I would like it to be, to use a kind of a childish tone, but it is amazing what this thing will do, and I love having a V8 in a Land Rover. You know, I'm a big like Discovery guy from back in the day, and there's just something about having kind of a little V8 burble underneath your right pedal. Granted, the V8 burble I'm usually accustomed to is a 4-liter with a blown head gasket, but even still, this is like the ultimate expression of a V8. Now, other things worth noting, the suspension on this machine is crazy. So you can actually get this thing in Octa mode. So if I were to push and hold this button on the steering wheel and engage Octa mode, and you're thinking, well, that's the highest performance mode, but there's a lot of confusion on what that does. It really loosens up the kind of sway control of the vehicle because it's meant for off-road use. So you get kind of some float to it, less rebound control, right? You get a nice kind of soft suspension, which is great if you're on dirt. When you bring it out to tarmac like this though, and you're on a really high grip situation, you don't really want that sway. So that's why they've engineered in the dynamic mode. Now, when you're just cruising around like this, car is perfectly responsive, car is perfectly comfortable. With the Duratrack RT tire, as you'd expect with a pretty aggressive lug pattern, you do get a little bit of tire noise, and then if you do want to go over 100 miles an hour, you're going to have to go for the less aggressive off-road tire or even the street tire, right? And then you can unlock up to 155 miles an hour of top speed. But that's kind of the interesting thing about the Octa, right? It's like, if you look at a Power Wagon, right? A Power Wagon to Ram or a Rubicon to Wrangler is a rock crawling package. They'll say it can do other things, but that's really what it's for. Big rocks, big articulation, right? Works really well. Then on the other end of that, if you look at Raptor, especially like F-150 Raptor, that's a desert runner. High speed undulations, you know, that's built for that. So what is Octa? Well, it's kind of, in my opinion, from driving it both on and off-road today, it's more desert runner than straight out rock crawler. So like it will rock crawl. It's got a lot of clearance, it's got a lot of tire on it. So it will do the rock crawling thing, but where it's really happy is on a mild service trail, just unleashing the horsepower and letting it float. Like, you can get this car into a groove and then the whole thing just settles in and it feels really good. So in my opinion, Octa is more of a high-speed runner than an all-out rock crawler. It doesn't have a front locker. It does have front and rear sway bar disconnects. It doesn't have a sway bar. So it will do it, but it's really at home on high-speed running. And then it's also at home, of course, at being a very luxurious kind of everyday workhorse, because it's got every kind of feature you'd want in here. It's even got a fridge, right? The amount of things you can do in a vehicle with the fridge is pretty crazy. It's got ventilated seats, heated steering wheel, heated windshield, automatic climate control, adaptive cruise control, all of the safety stuff. And then they've kind of just elevated everything a little bit, like with these one-piece bucket seats that really hold you in place. And then it's got those little speakers in the seats that kind of bump at your back so you can feel the music. So it's a really comfortable everyday vehicle, and that's really ultimately how folks are going to be using this. It's very clear that Land Rover saw the Defender, they saw the success it was having, and then they saw the G-Wagon and said, so people are paying $80,000, $90,000 for a Defender, why wouldn't they pay $170,000 for a Defender? And that's exactly what this is. So it's a very expensive vehicle, but it's kind of the ultimate expression of Land Rover off-road luxury. And I think that that's what's going to make this successful in the market. And I like that, unlike Mercedes, you can spec this thing out of the gate with an actual off-road tire. Mercedes says they have an off-road tire, but this is a much more capable off-road tire. And you can do things out of the box that most people wouldn't do, and yet you can bring it on the road. With the four-corner air suspension, it's much more floaty, it's much more cushy than like a G-Wagon, especially the older ones with solid axles that kind of rode like wheelbarrows. This has got that nice Land Rover Raptor float over these undulations. And yeah, look, the modern era of Land Rover, starting with like LR3, right, where they went more unibody in their construction. They rely heavily on air suspension, and they rely heavily on independent suspension, right? This modern era of terrain response Land Rovers has kind of culminated in this. So as an old school guy, like, I know a lot of folks out there would love a solid axle Defender to go bouncing around trails and fixing it with a roll of duct tape and pray to the Land Rover gods, right? That era is gone. The new era, though, is still very impressive in what it can do off-road, and then it's also usable on-road. And I never ceases to amaze me what a standard Defender will do, and then from what we've seen today, what this vehicle will do. So you're going to want to head over to TFL Off-Road, or we're going to have that kind of full initial review, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, if I can convince Land Rover to let us have the vehicle, we're going to bring it out here, and then we can do like some Hell's Revenge stuff and push it a little bit more and see what it will do fully max articulated, because I think there's more in this suspension. The magic in Octa, in my opinion, the headlines are the engine, but the magic is the suspension, right? I think that by eliminating the sway bars, you really open up what you can do with the platform and the sway control and the ability to control wheel travel to the exact degree. I think that's all very cool stuff. So a big thank you to Land Rover for inviting us out here and letting us kind of get a first taste of this Octa. It's nuts. It's very cool, right? It's not quite as flashy as I might like as an American for a Halo car, but for the ultimate in stealth wealth capability, it's pretty hard to beat. And it does feel, it's kind of very different character than the standard 110, which I'm glad to see. I thought that it was going to be kind of a 110 with some body kit bits, but it does have its own kind of unique personality. So head on over to TFL.com. We got more videos like this coming for you shortly, including some pretty cool watercross and stuff. See you next time.